Good day, BSS Social Studies 2-1. We are Group 4 and we're going to report about the chapter 20. Okay, so again, good day, future educators. So here's our learning objectives of this chapter 20. At the end of the lesson or this discussion, students will be able to first identify the impact of World War II with the relevance to the independence gained by the Federation of Malaya. B. Explain why Indonesia was coined as the biggest archipelago and largest Muslim nation in relation to its history and contribution to Asia. C. Evaluate the significant events and characteristics of Southeast Asia and the Malay world. And D. Create a map of Southeast Asia showing the countries of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. So, so, but first we have a game which is the Guess the Gibberish. So here's are the mechanics of the game. First is gibberish phrases or words will be flashed on the screen. Second, the learner must open their mics and state their family names to be recognized by the reporter. Third, to guess the gibberish, the learner must read the gibberish phrase or word first before stating the correct answer. So now let's play the game. So first, shout is Ace Shah. So what will be the answer of this? Yes, the correct answer of this is Southeast Asia. So second, Wallace line. Okay, so the correct answer of this is Wallace line. Very good. So third is the Malay word. Okay, so what will be the answer of that? So the correct answer is Malay world. Next, Indonesia. So what will be the answer of this? So Indonesia. Very good. So about the Guess the Gibberish game, what is our lesson for today? So our lesson for today is about Southeast Asia and the Malay world part 1. Okay, so let's tackle now. So Southeast Asia is a sub-region of the continent of Asia to which the Philippines and 10 other countries belong. So because of the natural wind patterns of trade wind patterns in the region, history has kept these countries from domination except for brief periods of any one of the major Asian power. Instead, it was their lot to fall into the dominant of each other. So only Thailand escaped Western colonization. With the West came Christianity. The gospel was easily accepted in only the country Philippines. So only the Christianity was easily accepted in the Philippines. So now let's go on to the land and people. So in Southeast Asia, the land and people of this is a sub-region of Asia consisting of the countries which are south of China, east of India, and north of the continent of Australia. So it consists of two geographical groups of countries, namely those which are found in the Asia mainland and those which are archipelagos. So the sea or Southeast Asia is about 4 million square kilometer with a population of more than 94 million people in 2004. More than a fifth of them in Java, Indonesia, and the most densely populated island in the world. So most of the races freely intermarry in this great melting pot of Asia. So the Malays and Gambler, the other Southeast Asia or sea races, and they are spread out the several countries. So its green mountains provide not only majestic sceneries. So can you view the picture? So um, green mountains provide not only majestic sceneries but also natural habitat for various birds and animals and mineral resources such as gold, tin, and etc. So the highest mountain in Mount Kinabalu in Sabah, Borneo. So the most beautiful volcano is Mount Mayon in the Bicol region of the Philippines. So Mount Mayon is found in the Bicol region. So I know that we you know this already. So there are tensions between ethnic groups within countries and between countries in the sea region or Southeast Asia region, as history has shown through various wars. So the regional and international conflicts are in their memories. The climate is monsoon and tropical, hot and humid with lots of rainfall. So the sea has the second largest cover in the world after the Amazon. So first is the Amazon and second is the Southeast Asia. Muna ang second largest forest cover in the world. Then the shallow waters of sea contain the highest levels of marine diversity for the world's marine ecosystems, including coral, fish, and mollusks. So now let's tackle about the Wallace line. So that line in the picture that is called the Wallace line. So there is a distinct difference between the animal species in sea and Australia due to the geographical divisions in the Wallace line. So Alfred Russel Wallace 1823 to 1913, which is a British naturalist, studied the geography of the sea and found that fauna of the Indonesian archipelago differs into two regions in what is now known to be a tectonic plate boundary. Okay, so si Koan di ay si Alfred Russel Wallace, mao ni si Jaang kanang British naturalist studied the geography. Mo ni katong the Wallace line. So the line distinctly separates Asian species and Australian species with a small mixed zone in between. So now let's move on to natural disaster of Southeast Asia. So the sea region lies of the Ring of Fire, so of the Pacific, and is prone to natural calamities, having many active volcano and earthquake faults in the two geological plates that meet in region. In May 1883, the eruption of the Krakatoa volcano wiped an entire island, raised raised temperatures, spewed hot rocks as far as the Indian Ocean rock ships of South Africa. So in December 2004, a 9.0 earthquake under the Indian Ocean sent strong tremors and killer waves that speed of jetliners to coastal countries, causing tremendous damage to 11 countries. Okay, so the, the 2004 earthquake and tsunami may be the world's worst natural calamity. So, ang tsunami sa Southeast Asia mo ni ang gituring nga kanang mo'y pinaka-worst jud nga calamity nga ilang nagian. So, now let's move on to the religion. Okay, so the peoples of Southeast Asia or Sea have different religions. So, in mainland Sea, Buddhism is a majority religion in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. So, in the Malay world, Islam predominates in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, and enclaves in southern Philippines. So, muna sa ang Buddhism ana sa Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. And second is ang Islam sa Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, and the enclave southern Philippines. So the sea has the second largest forest cover in the world after the Amazon. So I think that's all for my report. And now let's move on to the second subtopic, which is reported by my co-member.
Good day, everyone. My name is Brittany Jane A. Bacaro, the second reporter. Now we are going to proceed to the Malay world. So the first Southeast Asian group of countries that we will study is the Malay group. So the countries with Malayan racial majorities are Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Brunei, and Timor-Leste. Parts of southern Thailand also have Malay inhabitants, but we shall study Thailand in the chapter with Burma. So we included Singapore, although it is a Chinese majority city-state, because its location is near the Malay Peninsula and its history tied to it. Here are some of the pictures that featured the rich culture and traditions of the Malay world. The single royal courtship dance, Borobudur, which we will be tackling later on. So the first Malayan racial country that we were going to talk is Indonesia, which is also known as the biggest archipelago and largest Muslim nation. So Indonesia is the world's biggest archipelago with an area of 1,919,440 million square kilometers and with over 237 million people in the year 2008. It is also known as the world's largest Muslim nation and the fourth most populated nation in the world. Half of its 13,500 islands are inhabited, including Java, the most densely populated island, Sumatra, Sulawesi, which is also known as Celebes, and West Irian. It has most of the island of Borneo but shares it with Malaysia. In fact, the Philippine claim to Sabah, which is also known as North Borneo, includes a portion of Indonesian territory, but this is not commonly known. So Indonesia is one of three countries in the strategic Straits of Malacca. Its main cities are Jakarta, which is the capital, Surabaya, and Bandung. So, like Malaysia, its nearest neighbor, Indonesia, is a mostly Malay nation, but the Indonesians consider themselves different from and perhaps better than the other Malays. Why? Because of their rich resources, large population, and dominant ancient history. So Indonesia has rich natural resources including oil and gas, tin, spices, coffee, and palm oil. It is also known as the world's largest producer of kapok, quinine, and spices. So the population of Indonesia is mostly Muslim, which covers 86% of the population, with some Christian evangelicals, 6%, Catholics, 3%, and Hindu and animists with the rest percentage of the population. Moreover, there are 180 ethnic tribes that include Javanese, which cover 41%, Sundanese, Akan, Batak, Dayak, Balinese, Papuan, and more others. The national language used by Indonesian people by law is Bahasa Indonesia. But there are more than 742 languages used and dialects among 300 ethnic groups. For early history, relics of the prehistoric creature called the Javaman were found near the town of Solo, Java. So another evidence of Indonesia's antiquity is the small Komodo dragon, as you can see in the picture, is a miniature Godzilla found in the island of Komodo. So as you can see in the picture, this is Komodo dragon. Now we proceed to Sri Vijaya and Majapahit Empire. So apart from many other kingdoms in the archipelago, two successive early Malayan empires left their mark on the islands. The first was the Sri Vijaya Buddhist Empire on the year 683 to 1377 AD. At its height, the Srivijayan Empire has conquests in mainland Asia, including Cambodia. It was overthrown in 1377 by a Majapahit king named Hayam Wuruk. So the famous Borobudur, many Buddhas monument and pilgrimage site in Java is a relic, as you can see in the picture, of the Srivijaya Empire. Another significant contribution is the founding of Malacca in the Malay Peninsula by Parameswara, the last prince. So this is Borobudur, as you can see in the picture. This is also the ship in Borobudur, one of the relics of Indonesia, and the Prabanan. So over the ashes of Srivijaya Empire rose a different Hindu empire known as Majapahit Empire in the year 1293 to 1478. This Hindu empire started in the city-state of Majapahit in Java. It was founded by Raden Vijaya after repelling Kublai Khan's invasion of Java in 1293. So the Majapahit ruled over a wider area than Srivijaya and was the most dominant pre-Islamic kingdom in the Malay world. But little of it is left today, except in the island of Bali, where art, music, and people remain Hindu. So this is Bali Temple, and this is Bali people in the ancient times. So now let's proceed, or now we enter the world and Islam. So the closure of the overland Silk Route due to Mongol invasions and the loss of the Levant due to the Ottoman Turks brought Southeast Asia to the world stage. So international trade prior to the 15th century did not need the seas of road from North China to the Levant, the Mediterranean, and the West. However, in the year 1493, the Mediterranean and the fall of Constantinople created the need for a sea route to the east by sailing west. So, European explorers pored over ancient maps of Arabs and other sailors who had navigated the eastern seas, and the race for the spices of the Indies was on. Just as it was Islamic Turks who had closed the old route to the east, it was also Islamic Arabs and Indians who opened the new route. For their maps and guides accompanied the Europeans, for they had known these seas before the white men ever became interested. So, as we learned in the previous chapters, the Arabs of the Gulf were the most adventurous traders at this time. And it just so happened that they were also urged by the Quran to spread their religion, which is Islam. So the Islamic traders, Arabs, and non-Hindu Indians brought their faith as well as the business that local kings used to prop up their kingdoms. Local kings converted to Islam in order to have more leverage with the international traders. So in particular, Islam became the religion of the southeastern seas because it was through the Strait of Malacca and that Arab and Indian traders sailed back and forth the Persian Gulf and South Asia to the Spice Islands. So by the end of the 16th century, the islands had mostly converted to Islam. The passage through the Indian Ocean brought the commerce between mainland Asia and Southeast Asia, which is why spices and gold from Southeast Asia reached as far west as Venice and Rome. So this is Jakarta Tea Factory, which is an old photo, as you can see in the picture. Now, moving forward, we go to the Dutch colonization. So after some rivalry with the Portuguese and the Spaniards in the 16th century, the Dutch established their own colonial base in the East Indies. So their interest, like that of the other Europeans, had been steered by the lure of the spice trade in the Moluccas for spices such as pepper, mace, nutmeg, and more others, became the rage in the European city. So the spice trade was like gold, so valuable that the load of spices in the last of Magellan's 5 ships that returned home, which is the Victoria, if you have remembered, in 1526, paid for the entire expedition many times over. So the Magellan expedition discovered the sea route to the east and started a rush to grab the riches of the east, this time through Southeast Asia. Although the Philippines was a disappointment to the Spaniards, they went after the richer spice islands in the Moluccas, which is known as Indonesia in today's modern world. So until they lost it to the Portuguese, then the Dutch. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company was founded by the government to monopolize the spice trade. It had the power to colonize, maintain armed forces, and make treaties with native rulers. They captured Jakarta, which is also known as Batavia, in 1619 and made it the capital of the Netherlands East Indies. The Dutch beat the Portuguese or Spanish, although these two came earlier because they had more money and business savvy, and they were also ruthless. So the Dutch policy in Indonesia was motivated by only one purpose, which is to make money. They saw nothing wrong with maltreating or exploiting the natives. It was not until the 19th century that the Dutch humanized their colonial policy when the company became bankrupt. So, and the Spice Islands were ruled directly from Holland. The Napoleonic Wars in Europe brought a brief interlude of French rule in the year 1808 to 1811 and British rule in the year 1811 to 1816. But Indonesia was returned to the Dutch in 1816. By then, the Indonesians had tasted life without the Dutch, and they rose in several unsuccessful revolts: the Java War, the Akin War, and the Bali Revolt. Improvements made by the Dutch in the late 19th century came too late. Thus, the Indonesians had become infected with a nationalistic fever in Asia. So, they have been able to overcome their fears and tried to fight the Dutch colonizers. They were especially impressed by the martyrdom of Dr. Jose Rizal and the Philippine War against Spain in the United States in the year 1896 to 1901, and by Japan's victory in the Russo-Japanese War in the 1904 to 05. Hence, until today, many Indonesian males are named Rizal after the Filipino hero. Now, here we have the two most prominent nationalist leaders. Number one is Raden Adjan Kartini in the year 1879 to 1904. So, who is Raden Adjan Kartini? She is a Javanese princess who sought women emancipation through her letters, calling the attention of Dutch rulers to the plight of her people, especially native women. She became Ibu, or also known as mother in Indonesian language, Kartini, and ranks high among Asian heroes or heroines. So, decades later, her wish to raise the status of women was contained in the Indonesian constitution thanks to her. So, because of her fight, because of her will to fight their rights and liberty, decades later, her wish to raise the status of women was contained in the Indonesian constitution. Next, prominent nationalist leader is Ahmed Sukarno. So in 1927, together with Muhammad Hatta and Sultan Shahrir, he founded a nationalist party to rally for freedom against the Dutch colonizers. Sukarno proclaimed their independence credo as one nation, one flag, one language. They ruthlessly suppressed all political parties and jailed their leaders, including Sukarno and Hatta. So Sukarno and Hatta during this time were imprisoned because the Dutch colonizers were frightened of their nationalistic behaviors. So the Japanese occupation of the Dutch East Indies in year 1942 to 45 destroyed Dutch prestige and aroused nationalistic activity. Because of their hatred of the Dutch and gratitude to the Japanese, Indonesians happily collaborated with the Japanese during the World War II. With Japan's blessing, Sukarno as president and Hatta as vice president proclaimed the Republic of Indonesia on August 17, year 1945. For 6 weeks until Japan surrendered, the new republic organized its army of patriots. After the Japanese left, a fight for independence started between the Indonesians and Dutch colonial troops. After heavy fighting, the Indonesian and Dutch leaders reached an agreement for union on March 25, 1947. However, differences of interpretation resulted in more fighting. So on November 2, 1949, after UN mediation and a 10-month conference at Hague, the Dutch finally gave up. So after less than a year, Sukarno formally announced the rebirth of the Republic of Indonesia on August 17, year 1950, with its own national language, anthem, and flag. At last, Indonesia was free after 3 centuries of Dutch rule. So Sukarno aspired to be a great world leader, or at least a leader of the non-aligned world, sponsoring the 1960 World Non-Aligned Summit at Bandung. So under his successors, by the year 1980s, Indonesia had replaced the Philippines as the leader in Southeast Asia, both in terms of government stability and in terms of economic prosperity. Now, we go to Indonesia of today. So the divisions of Indonesia began to reappear after gaining their independence from the Dutch rule. Indonesia suffers from huge gaps between Javanese elites and the rest of the population and an authoritarian government. So these divisions included ethnic hatred of the prosperous Chinese. Over 500,000 were killed in violent anti-communist purges in the 1960s. regional differences, and separative movements. So, because of these happenings, Indonesia suffered greatly. So, nevertheless, the guided democracy took hold after some stops and starts, and Indonesia has had peaceful transitions of power since Sukarno and his successor. So Sukarno rattled the sabers at neighbor Malaya during the early days of the new state of Malaysia and the founding of Mafilindo, which is also known with the founding countries of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, partly calm fears of a new regional war. So Mafilindo later became the basis for the wider Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, a successful regional organization based in Indonesia. So because of these founding countries, Mafilindo Association of Southeast Asian Nations was born or created or inspired to be created. So the Indonesians, after all those happenings, had no qualms about annexing West Irian, or the western half of New Guinea, in 1961 and the former Portuguese territory of Timor in 1975. Pressure from the UN, Western powers, and the Philippines resulted in the release of Catholic Timorese leaders and the retreat of Indonesian troops and militia, leaving East Timor to become an independent nation in the year 2002. So, after the retreat of Indonesian troops and militia, it left East Timor to become an independent nation in the year 2002. So there are separatist movements in Aceh or Aceh, South Moluccas, West Irian, West Papua, Sulawesi, and Bali. So in year 2005, Indonesian troops pulled out of Aceh, and movement agreed to put on hold their demands due to the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. So after the Indian Ocean tsunami, of all the 11 Indian Ocean countries affected by the tsunami, Indonesia suffered the most. The death toll was 125,000, with 40,000 missing and 500,000 homeless, more than half of the total damage of the greatest natural calamity in recorded history. So the area has experienced succeeding earthquakes, tsunamis, and floods of lesser intensity, but nonetheless substantive damage. So radical Muslim groups in the Al-Qaeda affiliated Jemaah Islamiyah terror network were arrested due to a bombing that killed hundreds of tourists, mostly Australians, and destroyed the peace in the island resort of Bali in the year 2003. Indonesia's graft and corruption exists at all levels of the government, undermining the great strides in economic growth of the last decade. So, half of the people live on less than $2 a day income, and 17.8% live below the poverty line. Its $408 billion gross national income is threatened by falling oil reserves and huge high rate unemployment. So Christianity in Indonesia remains a significant minority religion, reaching about 10% of the population. Saint Francis Xavier, co-founder of the Jesuit order, was known as the Apostle of the Indies. So why? Because of his stay in the Portuguese Moluccas in the year 1546 to 47. Radical Muslim groups threaten Christians occasionally violently, but in urban areas, Christians are more free other than or compared to Muslim countries to openly practice their faith. So now you know the some of the important events of the Malay world, including the early history, land and people, and the Dutch colonization, and how did the Indonesian people regain their freedom and liberty from the Dutch rule. And now, we are going to proceed to Malaysia, the Malay Federation. Once again, I am Brini Jane Bakera, and I hope that you have learned something of the Malay world, the Indonesia, its early history, land and people, and how did Indonesia regained its freedom and liberty from the Dutch colonization.
Okay, good day everyone. So we all know the first reporter, so this is the continuation of chapter 20, Modern Malaysia. On September 16, 1963, the Federation of Malaysia, with Tunku Abdul Rahman as in the first Prime Minister and one dominant political party in Parliament. So meaning he is the most powerful or influential who stays one consecutive term in their state or country at that time. And now let's go to the next. So the process of stabilizing a new nation was difficult because as we can see in the photo, it shows the police are trying to prevent riots from the people. So it started on 1969. So it is the racial riots by Malays against Chinese, Indonesians, or who control the economy at that time. So they are not happy, so they are trying to create a protest. Another state of emergency was declared, followed by peaceful changes of government. So the government who took place and create a new legislations or new industry. So the government are the responsible to rule the people and make a changes for their citizens. So in that time. And now the Malaysia's greatest growth came from of Dr. Mahathir bin Mohamad. He is a physician statesman on 1981 to 2003. He is a visionary and prime minister, and he made a strong decision for their people, and he limit the power of royalty and silence the opposition of native Malay, and he gave the high oil income, and he encouraged to create new industry. So all in all, so Mahathir bin Mohamad who rule the rules, I will give the rules and regulations to their people. So we'll go to the next one. So Malaysia was transformed before. So Malaysia before became a weak, so and now it became a new industrial nation. So before the Malaysia became a weak, pero now it is a new industry nations. And also we have the Malaysia industry. So this is the industry of Malaysia. So they have the industry, economy, and the education, because people there are willing to study or to become a professional or to have a proper work. And also they have the science subject, technology. So they have the technology to make their life easier or to create things with the help of technology. And they have the arts, and also they have the tourism in their country, so they can promote their beautiful destinations in their country in Malaysia. So you can visit if you have the money, of course, in the time. And now at the photo, it shows the Petronas Tower, the world's tallest building in 2004. And here, the next one, we have the Putrajaya, the government center with the biggest mosque. So this is the Church of Muslim here. And Malaysia overtook its Malay neighbors and left them far behind in the wake of its tremendous economic growth by 2008. So Malay conquered their neighbors, of course, by the 2008. So time. So we will proceed to the next one. Here, The average income in Malaysia are 3,400 US dollar in Indonesia and 3,300 in the Philippines. So Malaysia afford to hire Filipino and Indonesian servants, so meaning they are so rich. Okay, so this is the continuation of Mahatri bin Muhammad. He is a politician, political, and Mahatri bin dismissed Anwar Ibrahim and jailed him, and he is deputy prime minister charges of corruptions, and Anwar was educated in the Philippines. He is a leader and media protested for him. And after the retirement of Mahatri bin Muhammad, Anwar released from jail. I think 2003 he released from jail. And Malay has made significant progress as a successful Malay state. Its advantages are challenges, and most of the minorities people are experiencing it, and the opposition of groups within. So that's it.
Good day, everyone. To continue the discussion about the Southeast Asian and Malayan world, I am Salisha Kuskus, and now we will explore Singapore, the city-state. Land and people. Singapore is a tiny city-state republic south of the Malayan Peninsula. Its total area is only 618 square kilometers, smaller than Metro Manila by 636 square kilometers, which makes it the smallest Southeast Asian country. The main island, as we see in the picture, is separated from the Malaysian Peninsula by the north by the Johor Strait. As you can see, it is only a small island. It is a sovereign island country, which is below Malaysia and above Indonesia. It is separated from Malaysia, but it could not really live without the latter because it obtains much of its water and food from the peninsula. Today, it links to the peninsula through man-made causeways and ferries. And the picture we have shown here is the Johor-Singapore Causeway connecting Singapore and Johor Bahru in Malaysia. It is a road and is also a railway that connects Singapore to the mainland, which is Malaysia. Singapore is the third country strategically located at the Strait of Malacca and has benefited the most from this location. Because of its location, it is the world's second busiest port. As we see in the left picture over here, it is the Singapore Keppel Container Port, and it is second busiest port. And over here is the picture of Jurong Oil Refinery Company, and also it is the third largest oil refinery center. And Singapore is also a main base for Asian telecommunications, air and sea traffic, trade, and banking operations. All of this is possible because of its location. And like Hong Kong, Singapore is a duty-free port. When we say duty-free port, it is a special kind of port where normal tax and custom rules do not apply, which is it is not very strict, or the customs and tax is less strict than other countries. Oil refining, manufacturing, banking, and finance make 90% of its economy since it has no natural resources. Since it is only a small city-state and which is smaller than Metro Manila, and usually it is Singapore has less agricultural land, so their economy is powered by manufacturing industry, and it is one of the largest ship repair and oil reconstruction centers and medical tourism attraction. It is the heart of Asian foreign currency market and is the third largest center for offshore US dollar funds. Because of an energetic manufacturing industry for computers and other appliances, it has become a newly industrialized country with the second highest per capita income in Southeast Asia after Brunei. We have since the Singapore has less natural resources and agricultural land, its economy is driven by the manufacturing sector like computers and pharmaceutical industry as well as trading and banking operations. Singaporeans are highly disciplined, industrious, and enjoy one of the highest standards of living and stable government in Asia. In a population of 4.6 million, 76% are Chinese, 15% are Malay, and 5% are Tamil Indian. English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil are spoken. Since 1984, the state introduced the teaching of Confucian ethics in the school curriculum. A family planning policy and cramped living spaces discourage couples from having many children. So we can also think that the fact one of the factors that of a successful Singapore is because of its people. You see, its people is highly disciplined and industrious, and maybe it is because children are taught of Confucian ethics in school at an early age, which includes virtues for self-cultivation such as filial piety, respecting the elders, loyalty, trust, rights, integrity, benevolence, and compassion to the lonely and the weak. Singapore has one of the highest concentration of Filipinos in Asia with 80,000 domestic servants and more than 10,000 skilled workers in offices and trade. Their treatment varies from high salaries for talents to painful experiences for servants, and expectedly Filipinos can be found anywhere in countries, especially in Asia, usually working as um, domestic servants um, or from high salaries jobs or works. Filipinos are known to find works and jobs abroad, and Singapore is one of the countries where large concentration of Filipinos can be found, usually as talents like for performers or singers, or servants like domestic workers and maids. History. According to Malay annals, in 1160 AD, a Malay chief landed in the fishing village of Timasek or Sea Town after a typhoon. He saw a lion-shaped animal and called the place Singapura or Lion City, which is iconically a symbol of Singapore, the mere lion. And in modern Singapore was founded in 1819 when Sir Stamford Raffles established a trading post for the British East India Company, which, if we remember, British East India Company is when India is colonized by Great Britain, and it became a part of the Strait settlements, and the opening of the Suez Canal further developed Singapore as a major entrepot for South Asia. The picture shown here is the Suez Canal, a human-made waterway that cuts north to south across the Isthmus Suez in Egypt. The Suez Canal connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, making it the shortest maritime route to Asia from Europe. We can see here that is why Singapore is one of the busiest ports, because it is also a route of the Suez Canal and the shortest route from Asia to Europe, or Europe from Asia. The British developed Singapore as an important Royal Navy base and boasted that it was an impregnable fortress. British says that this base is indestructible. However, the Japanese put an end to British pride in World War II. Despite being it called as indestructible fortress,
Only 2 months after World War II started, the British surrendered on February 15, 1942. The Chinese and prisoner of wars in Singapore suffered terribly in the hands of the Japanese. British rule was restored after the war, and Singapore became a crown colony on April 1, 1946, and later joined the Straits Settlements in the Federation of Malaysia in 1963. However, in the 1965 racial tension between the Malays and Chinese drove Singapore's leader Lee Kuan Yew into making a tearful public announcement of separation. Because the Singapore and Malaysia is joined by the Federation of Malaysia way back in 1963, and we can see that Singapore is ethnically diverse. And it then happened that there is a racial tension between the Malay people of Malaysia and the majority of Chinese people which is from Singapore. And because of that tension, Lee Kuan Yew decided that they be separated from the Federation in 1965. And despite an uncertain future, the Chinese majority of Singapore could not live under Malayan discrimination. Under the watchful eye of the British Commonwealth and the world, the separation proved peaceful. On August 9, 1965, Singapore unilaterally declared itself a new republic under the leadership of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, a Cambridge-educated leader of Chinese ancestry. Singapore became a parliamentary democracy dominated by a disciplined but closed circle of Chinese leaders in the PAP, People's Action Party, which is controlled by Lee Kuan Yew and his allies. When we say parliamentary democracy is where citizens vote for the members of the legislature or the parliament, and then the members who are in the parliament will choose or vote the prime minister, and whichever political party has the most members in the legislature selects the prime minister, and the opposition parties win few seats in the parliament. And in this situation, because most is dominated by the PAP or the People's Action Party, the results is Lee Kuan Yew became the prime minister, and it appears that authoritarian leadership is accepted by the people due to the economic prosperity which they enjoy. When we say authoritarian leadership, is that the decision-making power or the decisive power is given to one leader or one authority, and that integrity, sacrifices, and historical vision of its founders have turned Singapore into a developed and influential country, far beyond its physical size or resources alone. We can see that Singapore is very successful despite its size, and it is known that it has less to no natural resources at all, even richer than most Southeast Asian countries. Its policy has proven successful. A disciplined people, law and order, economic transparency and reliability, duty-free trade, urban planning, emphasis on education and security, and honest leaders. And despite its authoritarian leadership, which is strict to the freedom of the people, but it is somehow proven successful because of this, Singapore had a huge wealth, which cushioned it from the effects of many economic downturns, including the present global recession, and its foreign reserves stand at $170 billion. Because of its rich economy and high foreign reserves, it is less affected by the global decline of economic output. The economic success of Singapore outweighs reservations about its harsh internal controls on civil rights and political freedom, and allows its leader to look down on the Philippines, which enjoys more freedom as a failed state. The government keeps a firm control over the media and few opposition parties. The punishment for crime can be harsh, including whipping of minors and the death penalty for capital crimes. Um, we can see here that Singapore and the Philippines is being compared. Singapore is more strict and controls the civil rights and political freedom of its people. Meanwhile, Philippines displays more freedom, freedom especially in politically where the citizen votes for its leader, and then the Philippines enjoys more freedom than Singaporean people. Private sectors usually owns media, like the ABCBN is owned by private sectors, and the punishment for crimes is usually um, jail or imprisonment. We have fines, community services. We don't have death penalty, and which we can think that because of that, there is more crime in the Philippines. Because in Singapore, the punishment for crime can be harsh. The people over there is highly disciplined, and because of its authoritarian leadership, um, the people are afraid to commit crimes, and because there is a death penalty for severe crimes. And an example of that is in 1997, the Filipino maid Mrs. Flor Contemplacion was executed for the alleged murder of her comadre Delia Magay, another maid. The Singaporean authorities refused clemency despite requests by the Philippine government and public outcry. The tragic story of the two Filipino maids overseas highlighted the sad plight of working Filipinos everywhere. So that concludes my report about the city-state of Singapore and Chapter 20, Southeast Asia and the Malay world.
For today's attendance, please kindly answer the questions. Explain briefly how Indonesia regained their freedom from the Dutch rule. 2. What have you learned about modern Malaysia? 3. Why is Singapore a developed and influential country despite its physical size and resources? And for our assessment, create a map of Southeast Asia showing the countries of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. With our criteria, accuracy 25%, creativity 25%, overall presentation 40%, neatness 10%, with a total of 100%. So that would be all for today's discussion. Thank you very much for listening.